First mentions your primary skills. That's what you went to school for. And that applies to any job, whether you're a data scientist, whether you work in accounting, whether you work in HR.
Hi, Dave. Welcome to the Media House podcast Simulated Reality. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, I think you've recently published a book, Exciting Times Ahead. Is this your first book or?
It is, yes, my first book, incubating in my brain for a couple of years there, but I released it last September and have been sort of trying to find different ways to promote it ever since.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. It must be quite some effort, right? Because there's a lot of thoughts we usually have when we are, doing our work and kind of establishing some of the, frameworks in our mind. And we usually think that, this can be something big, like this can be a book. What was your thought process behind this book? Why did you think of writing this book specifically?
Yeah. So the genesis of the book came from mentorship. So I had been mentoring early career data scientists for about 8 years at the time when I decided to write the book. And what struck me was I kept having the same, let's call it 5 conversations with pretty much every single mentee. And this was whether it was at CVS, whether it was at PwC, whether it was people I just kind of met through my various journey in life, like everyone kind of had to have the same couple conversations. And so that led me, being math guy that I am, to think, hey, you know what, there might be an algorithm underneath this. And so let me write out the algorithm and share it. And the reason is because, you think about it, 5 good mentorship conversations, that's probably 7.5 hours, right? About 90 minutes each. And so that, with my own career, my family, everything else, like it's not scalable. But a book is infinitely scalable. Anybody can get a copy of the book, and it's almost the same thing as being mentored by me. So it gave me a way to essentially spread that out, because you think about it, it's going after entry-level career professionals, and that's the most numerous one, right? I mean, for every organization, you probably have 10 data scientists being led by 2 managers, being led by 1 director, right? So there's so many of them, and so let's scale it with a book. So that was sort of the initial inspiration, was just formalizing what I had been doing as a mentor.
Fantastic. I think that's really great that you have this passion of mentoring younger professionals, and I think it's a very important role in a lot of ways. And I'm sure that for some of those who are not able to get good mentors, this book forms a good guide. Let's dive right into the book, right?
Sure.
There is this. I want to start with this framework that you
Mhm.
talk about, right? You essentially the 3-dimensional framework that you talk about. What inspired the evolution of this framework, and how do you see this concept revolutionizing career growth, right?
Yeah. So the metaphor I like to use, there's 2 metaphors I like to use. So the first is, just think of a box, okay? So you've got the length, the width, and the height of the box, 3 dimensions, right? And the volume of that box is the product of the 3 dimensions. And so the bigger the box, the greater your career potential would be. And so those 3 axes become the 3 dimensions of the framework. And so each of those dimensions were sort of motivated by a separate conversation with various mentees, right? So the first dimension is your primary skills, right? And that's what you do. That's what you went to school for. And that applies to any job, whether you're a data scientist, whether you work in accounting, whether you work in HR. The point is, you went to school, you studied something, or you got a certificate, you were hired to do a thing. That's your primary skills. Okay? And the thing about primary skills is people are very tempted to get more of them, more and more and more, doubling down, tripling down. When you're a data scientist, that looks like, oh, maybe I'll just go get my doctorate, or, oh, maybe I'll go find this even more niche and esoteric data science algorithm, because then I'll know something that nobody else knows. And it's a really difficult game to play, right? And so that segues nicely into the second dimension, which is the complementary skills. Okay. So the first thing I do with primary skills, I'm like, hey, you're probably already good enough at that. Let's focus on your complementary skills. Let's widen the base of your pyramid, so to speak, right? And that's the second metaphor that I like to make. I'll get to that in a little bit later. But the complementary skills are the things you do that are not in the job description, but make you better at your job. Okay. And this is the first light bulb, the first aha moment that a lot of my mentees get. And I had to go through this myself. which was, the stuff that fills out your professional profile is what broadens the foundation that lets you build higher. So if you're a data scientist, it's not getting, oh, I'm going to go learn how to do deep learning, or oh, I'm going to go and learn all this really complicated AI stuff now, right? It's more about, can you give a compelling presentation? Can you structure and manage a project? Can you structure and run a meeting? Can I trust to put you in front of an executive and you're going to be able to explain to them what you did? That kind of stuff. A lot of times people call those soft skills, but I think the hard and soft paradigm is just a disservice to everybody. Because if you're a non-technical person, you hear hard skills, what do you usually associate with the word hard? Difficult, right? So that's intimidating. Soft skills, if you're a technical person, it sounds like it's beneath you. So let's take that whole framework, throw that away. Let's use primary skills, complementary skills. So that's the second dimension. That's what helps widen the base. The third dimension is impact. And this is, I can chuckle a little bit at some of the impact conversations I've had with mentees over there, but it's really about telling the story about why your presence and your effort and your work add value to your employer. And that's the vertical axis, so to speak, right? So you broaden the base and you go upwards. The metaphor I like to use is, if you ever spilled a bag of rice or a bag of sugar or a bag of flour, what does it do? It spreads out before it accumulates upwards. And that's what you need to do as a professional. You need to spread out, and then you can accumulate upwards. So that's the 3D framework in about a 3-minute overview.
Oh, fantastic. I think you visualized it as well, along with kind of, thinking about the ideas which enable putting a structure to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The book also introduces a compelling idea, right? Operating at the next career level before the official promotion. You call it be there before getting there approach.
Yep.
Let's dive into it a little bit, right? Why is it crucial to adopt the mentality of performing at a higher career level before we actually attain it?
So I learned this a while ago. So this is not something that I discovered. I'm mostly just articulating sort of things that are out there. Two points of view, right? So as a junior person trying to come up, I read an article, I can't remember exactly where I came across it, but they basically said, like, listen, the promotion is the lagging indicator. Just accept it. And then as I've gotten older and I've seen, okay, I understand why now. I can, as a hiring leader, I can articulate why that's the case, right? And so you think about what the promotion is. The promotion is an official change in title, compensation, control, remit, all these different things, okay? That comes with a lot of risk, all right? Just like hiring a new person, it comes with risk. And so when you're operating at that next level, when you're proving that you can perform at that next level, you're de-risking the entire decision. So when the directors or whomever, the vice president, whatever the next layer in the organization is, and they're looking at candidates, and they're like, okay, so, John Doe or Jane Doe, are they ready to be a senior data scientist or principal data scientist or data science manager? They want to know, okay, they are fully competent and capable of doing this, so that there's no risk, because as you move up, your sphere of influence gets bigger and bigger, so the ability for you to have a downside goes up. So that's really, I think that's really why they have this lagging indicators, because they want to de-risk it. In fact, that's the most common reason that I've seen people get their promotions denied at first, because the hiring power, the powers that be, will say something like, oh, I really want to see more of them at that next level. Well, they're basically articulating to you, okay, well, you need to be at the next level before you get to be at the next level in terms of title and compensation. And so that's why the game sort of requires you to do that. And then how to do that, how to get there, is to have that, like you said, proactive mindset. I look for opportunities to perform at that next level. And so what I like to say in the book, or I say when I do, conference appearances and teach classes, I call it the phrase that pays, right? What can I take off your plate? It's a proactive outreach to somebody who outranks you, so that you can take some of the work from that next level colleague, and then you can do it, right? Because if you're a DS1 and you reach out to a DS3, let's say, and you say, oh, what can I take off your plate? Well, if it's on their plate, by definition, it's DS3 work, right? And so now you're completing DS3 work. And I could count out examples of mentees who did exactly that. Like they go find the principal data scientist. Hey, what can I take off your plate? They break a little piece of that off. They deliver it, and we're like, oh, you know what? This person is capable of the next level. And then finally, the promotion comes right after that. So that's how that all kind of comes together.
Fantastic. Sometimes though, however, you talked about, take basically the idea is that you look at some of the jobs, roles, and responsibilities that come at the next level and start working towards, acquiring those skills as well as getting those projects to work on. But sometimes in the same organization, for whatever reason it could be, right, it could not be because of the person's competency, but it could be office politics, it could be some external factor that is influencing them not getting the right opportunities to be ready for it. In that case, how do you navigate this situation, right? And this is especially scary considering that you have just started out your career, you are 1 or 2 years into it, and then you're not able to kind of scale forward while you're also seeing your peers move ahead, which kind of induces a lot of anxiety within these professionals. In that case, should you look for another employer in that case and move on from that job, or is it too early to move on from the job?
So I wouldn't say it's too early, but I would first start with this type of a question by shifting the mindset, or making sure that the mindset's in the right place, right? So when it comes to moving, making new job, or even just testing the waters, you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason. So one thing that I like to say is you want to make sure that you're going towards something, not from something. Okay. From means you feel like you're in a bad spot, you got a bad manager, bad project, bad whatever, and you're just kind of like, I need to get out of this. What that does is it makes you less likely to scrutinize where you're going to go next, less thoughtful about where you go next, because you're trying to avoid the pain, right? And so what does that do? That oftentimes will put people in a position where they're constantly job hopping because they're just going from bad to bad to bad, as opposed to very thoughtfully and deliberately making a jump where they think they're going to have some upside. So you want to make sure you're going towards something. So then let's say, okay, so now that we know, okay, we want to make sure we're going to something, not away from something. When is it time to move to something new? And so for me, my own career, what I do is I do this exercise every couple of months, roughly twice to 3 times a year. And I'll just ask myself, what are my goals? Where am I relative to my goals? If I'm not there yet, why not? What do I need to do? Do I have a path forward? And then what am I going to do about it? Now, the second to last question there, do I have a path forward? That for me is when I kind of make the decision if it's time to move or stay. Okay. Because the goals can be dynamic, but I've always pretty much had a fairly ambitious career goal. I've pretty much always come back with, no, I'm not there yet. And so then it's okay, well, what can I do about it? And do I have a path forward? Right. And so, if you pull my resume or my LinkedIn profile, you could see I did a bit of zigzagging at the beginning of my career because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up. Right. I think everybody has to go through a little bit of that. But then, take kind of this like utilitarian approach to work. Like I'm there, go 100%, go full speed, but then also know, like, okay, am I still making forward progress relative to my objectives? And if it looks like I'm not, then I start to say, okay, well, where could I potentially get more traction, have more success, right? The way I like to compare it to like pilots and flying, right? If you've ever been on an airplane, like if I'm flying from Boston to Chicago, I'm not willing to compromise on Chicago. I can't not go to Chicago. Got to get to Chicago. But the pilot who's got to get us there, they might change their altitude to get smoother air if the air's choppy, right? I hear that all the time on the intercom, whatever they call it. So what I do professionally is I'm trying to move forward. I have a destination in mind, but if I have to get smoother air, right, I might have to change and look somewhere else, look outside for an opportunity. And so that's how I have made that. And that's how I encourage other people. So you've been working for a year or two, right? And you have to really take an assessment, right? Are you making forward progress? Okay. Are you in an environment where there's only 3 layers because it's a very small company or a very flat organization? Well, promotions might be very far apart, but are you making incremental progress, right? But the other thing is, what could you do better or differently to make forward progress? Have you squeezed every drop out of that, right? A lot of early career people that I mentor, there's a temptation to blame stuff. Blame the economy, blame your manager, blame your coworkers, blame this, blame that. And some of it's Correct. But a lot of it can be pulled back and say, well, what can I do differently? What can I do better? And so really, really look at that and be able to say, yes, okay, I've squeezed every drop out of this, right? And for me, there's two main reasons where you kind of squeezed every drop out, because they're so big that one person can't necessarily fix it. If the whole industry or the whole sector is just kind of going down or declining, that's a very big headwind. That's a very steep climb, because technically if everybody's losing, you can't be a winner, or it's very difficult to be a winner when everybody's losing. And the second is there are truly intractable political situations, truly intractable. Like you've got a rival team and they're just making it impossible to get traction. That's a great example where you're just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go find an organization that's a little bit more conducive to growth. So, if you hit those, definitely want to look elsewhere, but otherwise just keep trying to make forward progress, but have a goal too, because if you don't have a goal, you're just kind of rudderless in the ocean. So.
Yeah, I think a clear vision, but at the same time being pragmatic about it is something which kind of makes sense, is what I'm kind of gathering from your thoughts, right?
Yep.
Apart from office politics, right, there are some other tripwires that you talk about in the book. I'm sure that there are some very common hurdles that entry-level jobs, professionals with entry-level jobs are facing. What are they? What have you observed are predominant themes in terms of this? And how do entry-level professionals, especially in the context of data science, address it?
Yeah. So the whole concept of tripwires in the book is these are things that they're like booby traps, right? What they do is they don't get you fired. They just delay your promotion. They drag it out, right? So you think, okay, in a perfect world, you show up, you do good work, you get promoted 12 to 18 months. But you step on these tripwires, and then 18 months becomes 24 months, becomes 30 months, becomes 36 months, and so on, right? You're not doing anything overtly wrong. You're not getting like verbally reprimanded or threatened with a termination. It's just you're doing stuff. You're kind of like banging into things. Because again, a lot of early career professionals don't fully understand the rules of the game, and then they're just thrust into it. Okay. So there's a handful of ones that I see quite a bit. So the first one is being a boss hater, right? There's like a natural human behavior of just kind of like bristling towards authority. But like your boss is the most important person you work with, because they're the ones that are going to help advocate for your promotion. So if you're not constantly trying to make that the best relationship possible, you're just pushing your promotion further and further and further down the street, or further out time-wise. Why would you do that to yourself, right? So what I tell people is even if you think you have a good poker face, eye rolling, sighing, even like outright rebellion, like, oh, I'm going to do it my way. Why are you doing that? Your boss has a way more influence over your promotions than you do at certain points in your career. So don't be a boss hater, right? Really have some maturity and work with them. That's an important relationship. And they can become a great mentor too once once things start moving well. The second one is, I call it the job description adherence. That's someone who's like, well, that's not my job, right? Data scientists, very tempting. Very, very tempting, because that's like shutting the door on complementary skills. Think about that, right? Like you show, hey, I'm here to model and chew gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum, right? And it's like, well, hold on a second. There's other parts to deliver data science, right? You got to make the deck. You got to take the notes in the meeting, right? And so somebody who says, oh, that's not my job, well, it's like, okay, but technically that promotion that you want, that's not your job either, because you want a whole new job description. That's what a promotion is, right? You're an individual contributor, you get promoted to manager, it's a completely different job. So if you're saying, oh, I'm only going to do what's on this job description, fine, but then I'm not going to let you do what's on this job description, right? That's kind of the tit for tat that you get into. So don't be a slave to your job description. In fact, some of the most career accelerating things I did was because I said yes to something that was completely separated from my job description. The third one, and I think this one's the most dangerous for entry-level people, is I call it being the bad politician, but it's really just getting looped into disparaging commentary. Okay, so there's two flavors to this. There's the obvious one, which is you actually say something bad about another person. That's just, don't do it. Way too risky. Okay. The second one is when you accidentally agree with someone who's saying something bad about someone else, right? That's called tacit approval, right? Your failure to object is almost like an endorsement, right? So yeah, almost, right? So everybody knows, like, don't be the one that says, hey, man, that guy Joe is an idiot. You don't want to be that person because you never know who heard you. You never know who wrote it down. You never know who recorded it. You don't want Joe to find out you think he's an idiot, right? But then if someone's like, gosh, yeah, man, that Dave guy is a total jerk, huh? If you don't stop the discussion like immediately and say, hold on a second there, dude, I can't come with you on this one. I'm going to go talk to someone else and be like, hey, so I was talking to Cash App and we both agree that Dave is a jerk. You didn't say anything. You didn't co-sign that, but now you're a co-conspirator. Now you're an accessory to disparagement, so to speak. Terrible place to be. And where I think this is so tricky for junior professionals, they don't feel like they've got the clout or the political standing or whatever, whatever they think they need to push back on somebody, right? It feels better to just kind of go with the flow, don't ruffle feathers. But if you do, you end up co-signing somebody's disparaging comment. You may end up, reporting to Joey after you just kind of agreed that he was a jerk. So what I coach people on is you can acknowledge that somebody feels a certain way because there's nothing wrong with feelings, but then you have to say, but it doesn't match my experience. I can't agree. I just like I'll acknowledge that you felt that way, but I can't agree with you. So I usually say something like that, like, hey, I hear you. I acknowledge that you had a very real experience. But I haven't experienced that, so I can't agree. I've done that in conversations with people, in professional settings. It usually is it's a little awkward. It doesn't feel good, but it's a little bit awkward. But it prevents any more of that stuff from entering the discussion. People know, like, hey, I'm not going to go talk to Dave about other people because he's going to close the door on that. So those are the three big ones you want to watch out for as an early career professional.
Basically, what I think you're saying is essentially we have to explicitly say it out loud that I'm not a part of this conversation, because getting stuck into office politics is very, especially at an entry level, can be can you make your life more difficult to navigate into the office environment, right?
Yeah, I would say especially the negative sides of politics. Like there's an irreducible amount of politics in corporate environments. Anytime you've got more than 3 people in a room, there's politics, whether you know it or not, right? It's just the way that we're social creatures. But stay out of the negative stuff, all right? Because you're going to have to do the positive stuff to get promoted. But if someone's going negative, say, I'm not part of this negativity. You might feel that way. Your feelings are real. Your feelings are valid, but I can't co-sign that because I haven't experienced it. I haven't felt those feelings.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky situation to kind of navigate. I think you get a hang of it eventually, though.
Exactly.
And probably one of the main things would be to kind of let the work speak for itself. While you are saying that politics of the positive kind might be important in certain ways, why not just make your work talk the walk? Sorry, right?
Yeah. So
walk the talk.
yes. So your work can't, because your work is an inanimate object, right?
Yeah.
So think about it. If I build a model or someone builds a model, the model doesn't actually do anything. The model scores things usually. Okay. So this goes to that third dimension of the framework, but that's also one of the most important things I teach my mentees is you've got to tell that impact story. Because if you don't have a good impact story, you don't have any impact. You don't have any impact, you don't get a promotion, right? And I'll give you a real world example. When I was at CVS, we built an app. That app supported prospecting, business to business prospecting. Okay. So the first ingredient was building a data set that had every prospect in the country. If you stop there and you say nothing and you let your work speak for itself, you get no credit because the data doesn't sell anything. Data didn't make any deals. Okay, so maybe we wrap that data in a beautiful app, and that app allows people to find the best prospects. Does the app sell anything? No, the app doesn't make any money. So if you just stop there and you let the app speak for itself, it's got a beautiful UX, you're still not going to get promoted because you haven't sold anything yet. Okay, well, let's talk about usage data. So some salespeople log on to that beautiful app and they find some prospect. Does the act of finding a prospect make money? No. So you still can't talk about that. So you can't even pull up a utilization KPI. Still not going to get promoted. But then Joe from the Florida market signs on, identifies Acme Corporation and sells Acme Corporation, and Acme Corporation was worth $2 million. Now, finally, we could talk about the data powered the app, powered the sales users, powered this actual deal. Now you've got a story. Now, and that's the kind of good politics that you've got to get good at if you want to get promoted, especially in entry level, because your work is going to be separated by these organizational layers, right? Think about any finished good. I've got my AirPods right here, right? Somebody made that little plastic piece that sits in your ear, but that's not worth it. I'm not paying 100 or 200 bucks for that little piece. I'm paying for the whole thing put together. So if you're trying to get promoted because you designed the little ear plastic, well, you got to talk about how that, it made it fit better. People bought more of them, and now you're out selling other Bluetooth earpods, right? But like you got to put it in a story,
Yeah,
and
I
then
think that's
get people to say yes to that story, and that's politicking. Ultimately, it's politicking, but that's the good kind. It's the good kind. It's the fun kind too.
yeah. I think that's an interesting advice, and I think it's very important to kind of ensure that people appreciate and know about the effort that you've put into, which is very much a fair argument. Coming towards the end of this conversation, Dave,
Yeah.
right? If you had to give three suggestions, you want to give three advice to your younger self when you started out your career, right? What would they be? And can you also help us with a few examples in this context so that it helps data science professionals?
Yeah. So the first thing, if I could write a letter back to my 2006 self when I started working, is non-technical people are not dumber than you. They're just oriented differently, trained differently. They have different skills than you do. I can remember being at CVS and doing deeply technical work and being frustrated because people couldn't understand the technical work and sort of stamping my feet. Why aren't you like coming over here and learning about, risk ratios and hazard ratios and regression and significance and chi-squares? Like, why don't you know all of that? Oh, you guys, I have a monopoly on the truth because I'm the math guy. And that was career stunting, right? And so the pivot there is, okay, well, if you're going to talk to business people or non-technical people, you want them to make a behavior change, you want them to take an action. It's got to be in their language, it's got to be in terms that matter to them. And you got to remember that what makes you excited does not make them excited, and vice versa. So if you want them to get excited, you've got to put things that are exciting for them in your articulations of whatever you've been doing. So they don't care about significance, they don't care about R squared, they care about more customers, greater lifetime value, that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing. The non-technical people are not dumber, they're just oriented differently, and you got to go where they are if you want to be successful. The second thing is, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, you've got to be able to tell that impact story. You've got to be able to follow the work that you're doing through the organization to the bottom line. Every job exists because it provides greater economic value to the company than it costs. If your salary is 100 grand, you're generating at least 200 grand of value. Otherwise, the job wouldn't exist, right? And so you've got to be able to tell everybody how you did that, because if you don't, you're just a guy there pecking away at a keyboard. The last thing is, you are the author of your career, okay? It's different than school. In school, you do good work, you just move to the next level, right? In fact, you do the work at the level you're at. So if you're a fourth grader, you do good fourth grade work, you get to become a fifth grader, like clockwork. And that happens every year, every single year. Then you start working and you're like, why am I in the same role for 2 years? I thought I was doing good work, right? So you can't just wait for the promotion to be handed to you. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to do that positive politicking. You've got to tell those impact stories. You've got to build a relationship with your manager to get that advocacy. And you've got to go out there and drive it, because you can't just ride in the passenger seat professionally. So I had that mindset early on in my career. Oh, if I just do good work, I'll get promoted. And it took me several years before I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, I have to actually go put myself up for this stuff. So those would be the three things. Non-technical people aren't dumber. Focus on the money and talking about the money. And you got to drive it. You can't wait for it.
Fantastic. My one last question to you is this book useful for other people as well, not necessarily entry level jobs? Can they refer to it? And a follow up question to that would be, is the book timeless? Because, in the sense that, will the principles that you have set in the book be relevant 10 years or later as well? Or do you think that you will have to kind of revise and publish second editions, third editions of it?
So first question was, is this relevant to other roles.
Yeah, other senior roles.
So I would say this book has value to anybody who's an individual contributor
Mhm.
and anybody who's new into management that wants a framework that they can use to help kind of cultivate their people, because many but not all organizations lack a systematic way to go from the very beginning of your career up and through the middle of the career and then keep going up after that. So if nothing else, it's a recipe that you can use, put a little bit of your own spin on it, but it gives you a way to cultivate a team if you're new into leadership and you don't have that sort of machinery in your organization. All right. It also potentially works for non-technical people as well, because what happens is the primary and the complementary just switch.
Mm.
Right. As far as timelessness, I'm willing to make a wager that the core of the book will be timeless. And the reason why I would say that is it's at a certain point, it's fundamental economics and marketing, right? It's like, do good work, articulate that good work, get the right people to agree that you did good work, focusing on what matters, right? Create profit for the company or advance the mission, right? This stuff is an articulation of the way things have been working for at least the 20 years that I've been working, likely the 20 years before that, right? When my dad was doing his own career. So, this, it feels like it's robust to time. I mean, there might be some stuff at the margin. Like if I said, in the chapter on how to do a career search, maybe we won't use automated candidate management in the future. Maybe it'll all be Chat GPT or something. So maybe that piece of it changes, or the proper nouns. The proper nouns might change, but the concepts of broaden your base, have an impact, that's gonna last forever.
Okay, fantastic. On that note, Dave, thank you so much for your time. I
Thank
think
you,
it's a
sir.
very interesting conversation that can help many people. As I mentioned at the start, getting a good mentor is sometimes, just luck. And probably for those who do not, this book can probably serve as a good guideline, right? Thank you so much for talking with us about this book. And I hope that, many people get access to it and scale successful careers.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good luck,
Thank you.
everyone.